Hi guys, welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be working on STEVO the EVO. Now in today's video I'm going to be fitting an SST temperature gauge. Now you might be wondering, what is an SST firstly, and why do I need a temperature gauge on it? Well, the SST is the name given to the dual clutch transmission fit to most Evo 10s. I'd say most of them are probably dual clutch, but yeah, that's the name. So basically I want to fit a temperature gauge to the gearbox. Oop. Now, why do I want to do that? Well, the gearboxes are known to basically run too cold on the road, and they're known to run too hot on track. So it's going to be quite difficult to basically guess when the gearbox is happy and when it's not. And when we're driving it, when the fluid's too cold, the car feels absolutely horrible. It slips the clutches too much. It does it on purpose to warm the gearbox up. And when the gearbox gets too hot, then obviously the things inside the gearbox, the oil, the seals, even potentially the glue holding some of the magnets to the shift forks, that can get a little too hot and it can actually soften over time. If we're still struggling further down the line, I can fit what's called a Dodson heated sump. And what that will do is it'll actually, basically there's a sump you can fit to the gearbox, and the engine's coolant will run through that sump. Now the engine heats up really quick, takes about 5 minutes, but the gearbox takes up to 40 minutes in normal driving. So what you can find is the engine temperature, the engine water will heat up and it'll heat the gearbox up to operating temperature, which is about 80 degrees. And then if it gets to 100, 110, 120, well, the water is 80. So it'll keep bringing it down to 80. If it gets under, it'll bring it up to 80. But that's quite expensive. That's over £1,000 for that kit. So if I can avoid it, I will. But we're gonna see how I manage with this gauge. So that's enough talking. Let's have a look at the gauge install, and I'll sort of explain what you have to do. Okay, so the way this video is gonna go, I'm gonna show you how to fit the sensor into the gearbox, and then we're gonna sort of look at how my gauge connects up to that sensor. Now then, the first thing you're gonna need is an adapter, most likely, and that's to adapt your temperature sensor to the thread that the gearbox is going to use. So under the gearbox you have the fill port here, so this should match that. Now I've just fit the sensor to the bung, and as you might notice, it's quite long, and this is always the case, unfortunately. So we're going to have to find a place to fit this where it's not going to interfere with the road surface, because if this gets hit out when we're driving, that's going to be a bad day and a very expensive day. Looking under the car, we have a drain port here, a drain port under there, and a drain port here. Now I'm thinking of fitting it under there if I can. I can't see any reason it should interfere with anything, but I don't know what's on the other side of that hole. There might be something there that will stop me threading this all the way in, because it looks about 2 mil longer than the plug that's going to come out. Hopefully it fits. If not, it's a bit of a faff, because we're gonna have to drain all the fluid and put it all back in. Just it'd be a waste of time, but I'm hoping it's gonna fit. And here, well, it wouldn't fit in there anyway, but if I fit it there, it would obviously catch on the road surface. If I fit it there, it'll catch because it will be the lowest point. But up here, that's about flush. Well, the bar here is now the lowest point on the bar there, so the car could 100% bottom out and it would not be the lowest point. So that's the plan. Also, it's the closest to the engine, so it should show like the clutch basket area, I think, or the closest to the clutches, so it should read the hottest, which is what we want. So I'll fit it there. Hopefully it goes to plan, but there's only one way to find out. Now what I'm going to have to do is remove this. I'm going to put a bucket down here. I'm going to clean the bucket very thoroughly, and it's going to make sure there's absolutely no residue in there, because I want to reuse this oil. Now this oil and filter in this gearbox has 168 miles on it, so yeah, it's not really worth replacing it. Now usually I would just replace it anyway, but the oil and filter comes to about £300 on this gearbox, and I don't really want to be wasting £300 if I can help it. So that's the plan. Take that out, drain the fluid, put this in, put the fluid back in, and that's the plan. So I just done that up by hand, and it's actually sealed now, the gearbox, so there's no leaks coming out. So that leaves me with peace of mind that it's not hit anything on the inside of the gearbox. Secondly, there was a washer actually on the fitting, so that's spaced it down a further 2 mil, so it works out about the same sort of inside protrusion as you would have had from the standard plug. Now I just got to tighten it up. I don't have a socket that's wide enough and long enough. I've got wide enough, I've got long ones, but I haven't got a wide long one. I think it's like 27 mil, and it's going to be a long socket. So I can't torque it, but I'm sure I can get it pretty close. I took it out, I can feel how much roughly tension was on it. So as you can see, it's not the lowest point. The gearbox is actually lower than that sensor. Now, I've just given it a little squirt with some brake cleaner. It doesn't appear to be leaking, but I'll take it around the block and I'll give it another looking over pretty soon. So that's the final install, and it's about level with the subframe cross member, is it? I don't know what it's called, but it's about level with that. Probably a couple of mil higher. Now then, that's up to you to decide whether you think it's worth the risk. Personally, I'm happy to run it. My car's not slammed, and well, it is a little bit, but it'll be getting raised even more again soon. So I'm happy to. I think it's a worthwhile risk. The risk of hitting that, and if it does scrape on the floor, this plastic thing is very flimsy anyway, so that's just going to go. The brass thing will remain in place. Now then, so that's the sensor in the gearbox. I'll get up and I'll show you a little bit more about the actual gauge itself. So the way it comes out here, it runs across the subframe under there. I thought I'd put it under the subframe, not over, because there's an exhaust there. I don't want to melt the wires. Then it's cable tied all the way down, and then it goes in a grommet in by the wheel arch. So yeah, the grommet's under here. I'll insert a clip now so you can see what I'm on about, and then I'll go inside and I'll show you how I actually went about routing the wires to the gauge. And now once we're in the car, I'll put the key in, turn the ignition. Here we have the gauge showing the gearbox temperature there, 21 degrees Celsius at the moment. Now then, I've got this running off a switched ignition. Now behind this head unit is actually an orange cable, and that's a switched ignition. There's also a permanent 12 volt as well behind there. I'll insert a clip now so you can see that. And the cables basically come out of a grommet here. They run up here behind the dash and then to the relevant gauges. And yeah, so it's just turned the ignition back on. Here you can see the gauges working. So I've got a manual cut-off switch here. Now sometimes the car's stored in the garage for a long time. I might fit a race battery soon. And if the car's been stored for quite a while and I come to start it, this wideband especially can use quite a lot of power. So in that heat cycle. So what I'll do is, if it's been in here a long time, I'll flick them off, start the car up, and then once the car's on, then I'll flick them back on. So even when the switch is on, they will still turn off and on with the car. And that's why you want to connect it to your switched ignition. Now this is actually an AEM temperature gauge. It's got a water face in and it's showing Fahrenheit. I need to get the transmission Celsius face in. So that'll be in a future video, how to actually replace the face. And that's why they're not glued in yet, because I haven't, well, I want to change the face. Now this is actually a universal pod mount holder. I made it fit. Basically I drilled into this with some self-tapping screws. You can't actually see them, so that's pretty good. And then obviously I just drilled into this head unit surround, because should I ever decide for whatever reason that this was a bad idea and I want to take the gauges out, I've only got to replace this, which is a lot easier than replacing the dashboard. So that was the thought process behind that. I haven't seen any videos yet of an SST temperature gauge install. A lot of people use the apps. Personally, I don't want to use an app because I'm relying on one sensor in the gearbox. If that sensor's out, if the app's out, I don't know. I don't really want to be faffing around with Bluetooth, tablets, all the rest of it. I've even heard that people have an update and all of a sudden their whole dashboard stops working because they're using basically a tablet. If the app updates, the tablet's getting a bit old, you've got to replace it like you've got to replace your phone. And I just couldn't be bothered with that. I bought this once and hopefully it's just going to work and for the life of the car. So that's why I've gone with this. I'm not knocking people who use the tablets. You do what you want to do. Their argument would be they don't want to have the sensor on the bottom of the car because it's another thing that could potentially be hit off and all your fluid could leak out. But from what we saw from my install, it shouldn't be the lowest point. And if it does get hit for any reason, there's a very flimsy plastic connector that's just going to snap off well before that brass gets ripped out of the gearbox. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed the video and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.